There are numerous ways to cut a taper on a board. I'll show you the way I do it when I can. I've used other methods. If you don't have a tapering jig, as I do, you can just take a piece of plywood or another straight edge board and screw it to your work, or make you a shoe to push with at the bottom at an angle, and use it against your fence. But nonetheless, here's what I have. Okay, I have a taper jig. The taper jig slides along the fence. This is a Shopsmith 520 table saw, and I have it set up so that when this taper jig slides past the blade, we'll have a clearance in here of about 1 7/8 inches between the face of the taper jig and the inside edge of the saw blade. That matches fairly close to the sample scrap board that I'm going to be cutting. As you can see, I've put a mark along here showing basically what I want to cut. I don't care if it's exact. I need it to be 4 degrees. As far as the thickness here that I end up with and where it starts at down here doesn't matter. However, if the math is right, then 4 degrees should yield this to that. Okay, as I push it through. Before I cut it, this board is a piece of scrap, and it is bowed in the middle. Kind of hard to see, but perhaps if I do it this way, you can see that it carries a good amount of bow along its length. So whatever I cut is not going to be exactly perfect, but if you look out here at the starting point, there is no bow. At the ending point, there is no bow. Okay, it's tight. So it should be fairly close. Before I cut it though, I'm going to check it to make sure that it's in the ballpark. And if I do that, and I put this so that the stop here, the push block portion of it, is a stop for the stock. You put the stock in here and it pushes the material through. Okay, if I get that aligned just about exactly where the blade will contact the wood, and that will be right in this area here, and I measure across, I find that it is right at let me push it up just a little farther, right at 1 7/8 inches. Okay, however, the start of it is more than above the end of my fixture here, because if I measure across here, I don't get 3.5 inches. Okay, so in order for me to check what that is, I have an alternate method. What I will do is I will take the part, and let's see, maybe I can set it up over here so you can see it. I will take the part that I'm going to be cutting right here, okay, and I will move it so that it and the fixture, okay, are at their starting point. You see that? I've now moved it to where the blade is aligned and the taper jig is in place, and I can take a straight edge, lay it along that line, and see where I'm going to end up by aligning it with the, whoops, veering away, by aligning it with the edge of the blade here. Let me get that tooth out of the way. There we go. By aligning it with the edge of the blade, okay, I can place the straight edge along there and project it out and see that I am going to be cutting on the inside edge of this line and contacting just a little bit ahead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the fence to the right a 1/16 of an inch and make my cut. I'll set you up over here and you can watch that. Put the guard on. First I'll put the guard on. The guard is a spreader and anti-kickback and sawdust deflector all in one. Slides in and locks into place. Okay. Now, one of the advantages of the Shopsmith over a regular table saw is that I told you that I needed to move the blade in about a 1/16 of an inch. Well, it's set so that the arbor can move. As you know, it's also a drill press. So I'm going to move it in about a 1/16 of an inch, like that, okay? If I wanted to be exact, I could put a stop block up there, measure it, do whatever I wanted, but the thing is, for fine movements, that is a far easier way to change the distance between the fence and the blade than trying to get the fence to move in very small increments. But at any rate, now I have what I think is about the right distance. Okay, so need to do a 4-point check to make sure that everything is locked in place. My table tilt, my table location left to right, my quill is locked, and my headstock is locked. Okay, the speed is already set correct for this cut, so I'm going to turn on the dust collector, plug in the saw, and then we'll make the cut. And so, what did I learn from that? Well, first of all, could not use the chip deflector portion because as you push the board in at an angle, instead of having a butt edge that will push it up as it goes through, it has a point which first of all gets caught on the front of the deflector, and secondly will wedge it solidly against that blade, and you can't go any farther. Second thing was the anti-kickback pawls here on the inside edge where they make contact first. The board runs along this edge and pinches it like this. So I stop the saw, I move them up on the board like this. So because I cannot use the chip deflector easily or safely, cannot use the anti-kickback pawls, having the spreader on there is the least of my worries. I don't believe that I'm going to have a problem with the wood closing the kerf as I cut, because I'm going from a very thin strip to a thick strip, so in all likelihood it'll move out. I'm going to take the guard off and make a few other changes and try to cut it safely another way. The other thing I learned is that it's very difficult to get all of this set in place and start to move it through the machine. So what I did here on the back side is I put a flip stop, you know, a second hand, an auxiliary table if you will, to extend it out so that I can lay this down without having to balance it as I was before. Let me put this up. Before I was trying to hold this like this, and the board as I maneuvered it in like this to keep from hitting that blade. Okay? And then push it through the saw. Okay? I was trying to do all of that by hand. I'm going to use the stand here to support this as I position my board for the cut, which should be fairly simple because I can get as much room as I want before I pull that board in, okay, and get it aligned. Then I can hold it here and just make the cut and pass it through, okay? The stop here on this end will pull the board, and I can control it, I believe, with my fingers. I'm not going to use a, I'm just going to use a hold down. I have several. Probably the easiest one would be the Shopsmith brand, although I have several homemade ones. But I can use this down here where I get closest to help hold the board in place as I pull it through. Okay? Now that I have one cut, it's really easy to do trial and errors. Okay? That looks like it's going to work. Okay. So now I'll set you up on, you can watch as I cut all four of them. By the way, that, my friends, is one of the best reasons to do a trial run with a piece of scrap before you waste your good material and your fingers. I really appreciate you stopping by. If you don't mind, would you go ahead and poke that like button? Thank you.